The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Hello, welcome to a discussion with Phyllis Burke. I'm Kathy Hoffman, and I'm pleased to have Phyllis Burke, the author of Family Values, Two Moms and Their Son, here with me today. Welcome, Phyllis.
Thanks for having me.
I'd like to start out our conversation today by asking you what inspired you to write this book.
Well, at first I was going to write a history of the lesbian and gay civil rights movement in San Francisco since the time of Harvey Milk, telling it through personal stories of the various people in our community who made things happen, from Cleve Jones, who created the quilt project for memorializing people who had died of AIDS, to Roberta Achtenberg, who's now the highest, well, at this point in time in 1993, the highest ranking openly gay person in government. And but also during this time, I was going through adoption proceedings to become my son's second legal mother. And I wanted to write all of this down for him, for Jesse, so that when he got to be a big boy, he could read about it and have it sort of in one place. Because the story became fairly complicated, because our family lives as lesbians and gay men are so tied up with politics, are so tied up with media images, just as much as they're tied up with scraping SpaghettiOs off the floor. So all of those things come together, and I wanted him to have the story in one place. And I also wanted to write this book in order to try and communicate with people who are straight, who are liberals and moderates, who are our friends, but who still might feel uncomfortable with us having children or adopting children. I have found that that's still a very iffy area for a lot of our friends. I don't think I'm going to convert the radical right. They're in it for the money, so they're not going to change at all. And I also wanted to have a history of some very powerful lesbian leaders who have not been written about in most of the lesbian and gay history literature. This is not simply because of lesbian invisibility, which we talk about a lot, or because someone did this to them. It's because they worked very often on custody issues with lesbian mothers and gay fathers. And it was very important in the late 70s and the 80s to not become very public, because the family law court judges might think you were politicizing something about with this child, and you could possibly sabotage by public exposure of any kind the adoption or custody hearing.
You wouldn't be a good parent, so
right, right. And so these women they worked very quietly, Roberta Achtenberg and Donna Hitchens, primarily. So, and I wanted to have that history too.
So these days of summer 1993 are happy days.
They are happy days. I think that there's a lot of hope that, well, you know, Jesse has two legal mothers.
Yes.
And there are about 250 children in this country now who have two legal parents of the same sex. There are actually over 4 million lesbian mothers and gay fathers in the country. But these same-sex co-parent adoptions are very rare still.
Because of our legal system,
yes,
and all the battles that need to be fought, which you
well,
detail.
We're illegal as it is in about 26 states, so I doubt we're going to have family rights. You know, we're born, you're illegal. So
yes, yes. So your book talks a lot about your personal struggle with co-parenting Jesse, your son, who is soon to have a birthday.
Right, he's 5 on June 22nd. He gets to go to Disneyland, so.
Oh, there's a big trip in store for your family.
Very special.
So when the book, I was impressed with the levels that you talked about those struggles, the very personal struggle that you had, maybe, and as well as the personal that became a political struggle for you. Maybe we could talk a little bit about the personal struggle and
I had a lot of internalized homophobia that I wasn't aware of. I didn't think you could have two mothers. I thought, and there were a lot of things that I had to learn. And that whole procedure is something I write about in the book. On a personal level, I also started to have a terrible fear that something would happen to Cheryl and I would lose this child who I loved so much, more than my own life. I mean, this boy, I mean, he's my son. And I had no legal connection to him. If something happened to her, he could be taken from me. Even though it wasn't a likely scenario, since I was in San Francisco, it was still possible, even there. And it took a long time for me to even accept the fact that I was his mother, because I was afraid to say it, as if I might jeopardize it by saying it, you know. But then he said it. He just started calling me Mama Phyllis, and it was a very scary sensation. And you know, little kids, if you know, you've worked with children, if they know that they've got you on something, they just keep pushing that button. And so this day that he was learning to talk, and he kept saying, Mama, and I said, no, Auntie, and he just kept laughing, saying, Mama, I know that you're Mom.
Children he knew. Are truth tellers.
Yes, and that's, you know, and I called my mother up, and I said, I'm his mother. And she said, well, we knew that, dear. You know, and my partner came home, and I said, you know, he shouldn't be calling me Auntie. I shouldn't push that. I am his mother. And she said, I knew that. Did you take the garbage out? It is Wednesday. You missed it last. So everybody in my life knew. And I was afraid to take that word. And as I've been traveling throughout the country, I know why. Because a lot of people still have this image of lesbians and gay men as people who are unfit to be parents and who hurt children.
I would imagine some people would say, aren't you being unfair to Jessie?
Right.
Because you live in San Francisco.
I asked myself that question, actually.
You did, and what answer did you?
Well, Cheryl, it's very funny. You know, I said that it's not. You know, why should we? I don't know. Everything is so homophobic as it is. And Cheryl gave me a very interesting answer. She said, you know, I have always wanted 2 children. We've only got 1 so far. They're both working on me. But I've always wanted a child. I know I would be a good mother. I know that in my heart. And I was raised to not pay attention to what everybody else thought of me. That was none of my business. It's only my business what I think of me. And it would be dishonest for me to say that I shouldn't have a child, because I know that I should have a child. And it was so, I said, well, how did this happen? And she said, well, it's a result of being raised as a Church of Christ fundamentalist. I said, well, all right, what is the connection between that? And she said, because we are taught that too. To really go with what you really believe and what you're really feeling, and to not go by what everyone else is saying. She said, I'm going to be a good mother. And one of the reasons I picked you is I think you're going to be a good mother too.
How wonderfully affirming for the 2 of you.
Oh, it was kind of terrifying.
Yes.
I mean, when I was younger, I've always known I was lesbian. Yes, I was born lesbian. Since I was very young adolescent, I knew. And Cheryl, Cheryl always knew she wanted to have this kid and was going to do it. But I assumed, because I was lesbian, that I couldn't have a child. I mean, I didn't even know anything about the female reproductive system. When they did that in school, you know, I just would say, oh yeah, fallopian tubes. I paid no attention. It didn't apply to me.
You wrote that part of your life off.
And there was a little piece of me I had cut off, because I really did want to have a child. But I was so afraid of how much I would love this child. I was afraid of that. And I think maybe it wasn't just because I was lesbian. I think it was because I knew, you know, when you really love a child, I think it forces you to pay attention to certain things that are happening socially that you may be able to ignore otherwise.
Yes, because children are
Your
our
children,
future.
they're
and,
there, they're coming along,
and we're giving them our value system.
Exactly.
I found your book to be filled with these ironies on many levels. Even the title, Family Values, that's often been used against us.
Right, right.
We are not family, and we don't uphold family values.
Right.
And yet your book is very much about your values, yours and Cheryl's, your partners, and passing those on to Jesse.
That's right.
I was touched by the letter to Jesse at the back when he's old enough to read it, asking his understanding and really laying out your love, your unconditional love for him. And I thought, this is what family is about.
I think it is.
At the end of coming at the end of the book, after this long story about your battle, if you will, to become his co-parent, his legal co-parent, it was a really powerful ending to the story, as is the title, Family Values. I'd like to shift from yours and Cheryl's and Jesse's family to the political part of your story. I found that to be another ironic level, all the behind-the-scenes politics. Tell me a little bit about how the personal, your love for Jesse, became a political action. You took part in many political actions, as you detail in the book.
Right. And I hadn't really taken part since the time of Harvey Milk's assassination. That I pretty much closed the door at that point. I was also a teacher during the Anita Bryant and John Briggs days when they tried to get all the teachers out of the schools. And I pretty much closed the door on the political stuff. I didn't believe in it anymore. And then, you know, when the state had to be allowed into my home, examine every crevice and corner of my life, criminal checks done on me, my child's pediatrician, his nursery school teachers, part of the investigation on who I was. And this was with a child that I had raised since the moment he was born and helped, you know, keep inside Cheryl. She was on 8 months of bed rest, so I felt like I'd been dealing with him for even longer. And I had to prove that I was his mother. And I had to carry a piece of paper with me in my wallet at all times that said if something happened to Jesse, I was authorized to give medical treatment to him, to authorize it. And so I started getting angrier and having more anxiety about this, and started realizing how disenfranchised we are and how destructive it is for our families and our relationships not to be allowed to have legal status. Because we need to be part of the social fabric, and sometimes that legalization helps you through rough times. It's not just disposable. Sometimes we think, oh well, it's just, you know, a lesbian or gay relationship, and sometimes we internalize that. And so I ended up, as part of the story, covering Queer Nation. And they, you know, I walked into this room and, you know, here are all these very young lesbians and gay men, you know, snapping their fingers saying, we're here, we're queer, we're fabulous. When I was their age, I was saying, I'm here, I'm queer, maybe I should kill myself. And I really struggled with that idea of suicide for many years. And here they were saying, we want all our civil rights. And unequivocally, we want the right to dance anywhere, in public. And I was sitting there and I thought, well, you know, I haven't really been asking for everything I should have been asking for. And then Basic Instinct came to town, and that just, up until then, I'd sort of been to the side, and as I write about in the book, I wrote about, you know, the shopping mall tours that they would take, but I never felt a real deep hit from it. And then Basic Instinct was filmed in the city in 1991 during the year that I was undergoing the adoption process. And what I saw is that every type of positive images of lesbians is, we call it de-lesbianization, is clipped out of the movies by test audiences who are uncomfortable with it. The only thing that is left shows a homicidal, suicidal, psychotic, ice-picking murderess.
Not
now,
exactly a positive image.
Not really something that, you know, you can take into that family law court and say, look, you know, we're human beings, we have real relationships. Now, I would never say to anybody, we're just like you. And most people don't get up and wonder, where can I enroll my child for school? Will he be okay there? Is this church going to be okay for him? Will this pediatrician be positive toward our family? We're not just like everybody else. But my buttons got hit with that movie.
It was filmed in
San Francisco. Michael Douglas, Sharon Stone, the whole bit. And the amount of money that they were given to create it was so astounding. People are so encouraged to make this. The script got $3 million, the highest amount of money ever paid for a screenplay in the history of Hollywood. So of course we went after that.
And you did, along with the members of Queer Nation, did political action.
Yes, we did.
Events.
We tossed glitter in the air. There was a temporary restraining order saying 19 times forbidding glitter near the set. Because I guess it interferes with the lights or something. They were very creative and very funny. Most of it was quite funny, and I really, I got to love these activists so much. And there always is a little rogue element to every group, and people tend to point to it, but most of the time they were just trying to deal with visibility issues.
I found that part fascinating, sort of if I may use the word metamorphosis, from being a new mom,
right,
to this person who's on a movie set protesting.
I know.
Again, it was one of the many layers in your book that
well, it surprised me too.
I found your sense of humor just shining at those moments, and I imagine that your sense of humor got you through some of these really painful events, again, from the personal fighting for the right to co-parent Jesse, as well as to say, hey, we need some rights in our
That's right. You better have a sense
lives.
of humor. If you don't have a sense of humor, I think you can just be so depressed, because things are still very difficult for most of us. So you do have to keep it light. It's your survival tool. Yeah.
Yes, and that comes through. Your use of humor comes through very much in the book. How about Jesse now, as you get ready, for instance, to send him to school, as he becomes part of those new institutions of school life? How are you and Cheryl, what are you doing about that? Choosing a school is something that you talked about.
Right. We've been very careful that the first nursery school that he went as soon as he could walk. He had a little bit of daycare during the day. And we knew that it was the school for us because when they sang Farmer in the Dell, they sang And the Farmer Takes a Partner. And because there were all different kinds of families at their school. So we thought, oh, these people will probably be very good. And they were very good. And there were other children in the school who had lesbian mothers or a gay father. Not a lot of them, but a number of them. And the school that he's in now, he can be in, he's been there since he was 3 through the 8th grade. And the very first parent-teacher meeting before the 3-year-olds started school, we introduced ourselves and I said, my name is Phyllis, this is my partner Cheryl. And if your child comes home and says there's a little boy named Jesse in class that has 2 mommies, your child is telling the truth. And we are the mommies. And so there was sort of like that moment of, oh, I've seen this on Donahue. And then people sort of get used to it after a while, and you're a little bit of a curiosity. And then you're just a member of the carpool.
So you found some supportive situations.
Absolutely, and the most important piece of that puzzle is feeling comfortable enough to be able to make ourselves known. I think that people can sense when you're hiding something, whether it's your relationships or whatever. And they're not as comfortable with you because they don't know what it is you're hiding. Why are you hiding something? Usually when people are hiding or have a secret, it's because there's something wrong. And so by being very open about it and being willing to talk to people about our situation, and people have become very comfortable. Jesse goes to the other children's houses and their birthday parties and everything, and their children come to our house. And I'm very proud of this school. I mean, there are about 4 or 5 children in the school. This is a large school with lesbian moms or a gay dad. And so it's not an overwhelming number of us, but they're open to it. They're open to listening. They're not as terrified of us also because they're more used to us being around. You know, they've seen us before, which is one of the reasons I wrote this book, to try and communicate with people who do not know any of us or do not know that they know us, which is more the case, because people are afraid to come out. They could lose their children still.
And I think it's important for people to read the book and say, yes, lesbian moms exist. They exist in our city. They exist in Minneapolis. They exist in Bloomington.
That's right.
And also for young people, once in a while you address that very issue, for young people to know that there's hope, that there are more than just the stereotypical lesbians. There are lesbians that go unnoticed and go about their daily lives, and that, in fact, are parents.
That's
lesbians
right. When I wrote this book, I was very interested in making sure to have as many different kinds of lesbians and gay men in the book as possible. You wouldn't know from the cover that there are any men in here, but there are a number of marvelous activist men, and they have different ethnic backgrounds, different age ranges, different cultural or economic backgrounds, class backgrounds. We have lesbians who are plumbers, and we have lesbians who are doctors. There are gay men who are academics. There are street activists. A range of people, because I want the young lesbian or gay boy, adolescent, to be able to maybe pick this book up and find someone in it that reminds them just a little bit of themselves and gives them a little bit of hope on the range of possibilities of who you can be.
Yes, so they don't have to go through what you did as a teenager.
Exactly.
The suicidal thoughts you alluded to before.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right.
Shifting planes a little bit again here.
That's okay. The book does that all the time. So
it does, and it's, again, so wonderfully faceted. What's been the response to your book? Random House is the publisher, and you've been on a tour. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, Random House, this is the first book about lesbians that they've ever published. And they're certainly a mainstream publisher.
Yes.
And they read, my editor read the book, and the publicity department read the book. They said, this is wonderful. This is no one's ever written anything quite like this. We're really proud and delighted to have this book, and we're going to make it our lead book for Mother's Day. And so then they approached all the parenting magazines, thinking, if they read this book, the doors will fling open. All the doors shut on Random House, which is a fairly powerful publisher. Because they are not comfortable with the idea of lesbian mothers. And you have these questions all the time. Well, it may be okay in New York or San Francisco, but what about, and then the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation has become involved in this with Family Values, with these various magazines. They said, well, she's going to Minneapolis, and they seem to be able to talk to her there. There seems to be some interest. It's not just, we are everywhere, and but it has to be so closeted for the protection of the custody of the children so often that people don't know that. So we've had a lot of trouble with that, yet there have been many mainstream papers who have written about it. Your major newspaper,
Star Tribune.
The Star Tribune is going to be writing about it. Most of the major newspapers. So we're making some progress, yet this book is hitting up against the wall. And it's a censorship wall, and this is, again, what we're talking about. If I had killed my son, and I had written a penitent memoir, the penitent memoir of a lesbian mother, it would be everywhere. And I know that that's a scary thing to say, but that's what it really comes down to, this constant sensationalization of everything that we are. Now, I don't want to pretend that we're boring, but at the same time, that it's a form of collaboration to block it out simply because it is lesbian mothers. And that's their only reason. It's not the book, it's not the writing itself, so.
I think it gets at that core again. It's attacking some values that people
Right.
hold to be black and white or are so rigid in their own lives that because your family looks a little different, it's scary.
People are afraid of what they don't know or they don't see. And that's why when my editor said, "Can we put your family on the cover?" At first I thought, oh, that's, boy, I'm really out now. This is really being out. And I thought, yeah, because it's a way to make us visible, and I feel safe in San Francisco. Jesse is legally my son. Cheryl and I have our relationship is very solid. No one's going to take that child from me. And so I feel that those of us who can come out have a social responsibility to do so, because the lesbian moms and the gay fathers generally cannot.
Yes, because they're in the situation.
Right. They'll
Or in different
lose
situations.
In different situations.
Very vulnerable situations.
Right, and you know, from city to city, I see the conditions under which lesbians and gay men are living, and it's very frightening.
Maybe to wrap up here, we
Okay.
could talk about your hopes for Jesse, for your family, and maybe for the larger gay and lesbian community. That's a sort of a tall order
That's
in
all.
a minute or two here.
Yeah. Well, you know, my son taught me the power of imagination. He has a very powerful imagination.
Peter Pan
figures heavily
largely.
in his psyche. And he sort of taught me that if I can imagine it, there's the possibility it can happen. And I can imagine a time when lesbians and gay men will be part of the fabric of this society, and we'll be able to just live our lives as human beings and not have to fight for the right to exist, and when we'll be able to legally recognize our relationships and our families. And I can imagine it, and as long as I can imagine it, I'm going to keep on thinking about it and doing anything I can to make that happen.
All right. Well, your book certainly is a positive step forward in making happen a world that you talk about.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming today.
You're welcome.
And good luck, and I hope you get to be with Cheryl and Jesse soon.
Yeah, I will. A couple days.
My guest today on an interview with, a discussion with Phyllis Burke. She's the author of Family Values, Two Moms and Their Son. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
A presentation of the Hennepin County Library.